Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm Tami Stackelhouse, fibromyalgia coach, author, and founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute. The goal of this podcast is to empower you with access to the dream team of experts and coaches I've discovered are key to living the fibro life you love. From the comfort of your own home, and maybe even your pajamas, I'll help you take back control of your life and health. To help out with fibro fog, I always include full show notes and additional resources at fibromyalgiapodcast.com. Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 130. Today is our Ask the Coach episode, where I answer questions sent in by you, the listener. You can think of this as our Dear Abby or Dear Tami episode with fibro questions. Today, I'm answering a question Stephanie sent in on Spotify about privilege and helping low-income individuals. It's a good one that deserved to be answered here, not just privately. I'm also answering a question I received about what to do if you don't have a diagnosis yet. Can you still work with a coach if you haven't been diagnosed with fibromyalgia? As always, I want to remind you, the information that you hear on this podcast is meant to be educational and inspirational. It is not meant to be considered medical advice, nor is it intended to replace consulting with a qualified physician or other healthcare provider. I'm here to give you new ideas that you can talk with your providers about. So let's start with Stephanie's question. It's a biggie. Here is what she posted on Spotify. How do you propose we help low-income individuals with CFS and fibromyalgia? Self-care and wellness are rooted in privilege, choice, fellowship, support, time, and money to invest in themselves. That is a great question. And you can see why I wanted to answer it here. You know, a lot of this podcast, of course, I'm telling you about our training programs. I'm telling you about our coaching programs because, yes, that is what I sell. That is what makes the money for me to make this podcast. But that's not everything that I do. And it's not everything that's in the fibromyalgia community. So we're going to answer this question in two ways. First, I'll talk to you a little bit about what I do to address this problem, and then we'll talk about some other organizations. But before we go into that, I just want to say that I do agree that wellness is often rooted in privilege, and the privilege specifically of having money to invest in ourselves. However, I disagree that self-care is, if you understand what I mean by self-care. Self-care is not only about what you do. Self-care is not massages or bubble baths or green smoothies. Those are the things we do because we're practicing good self-care, but the actual self-care is the underlying thoughts and emotions that drive us to do those things. Self-care is actually how we treat ourselves, how nicely you speak to yourself inside your own head, for example. Self-care is things like, do you push yourself all the time, or do you give yourself a chance to relax? And these things really have nothing to do with your income level. Although I will admit the environment you're raised in absolutely affects your thoughts and emotions about caring for yourself, but your income doesn't dictate that. I've seen very wealthy people who had terrible, terrible self-care, and I've seen very poor people who had awesome self-care. If you want to learn more about what I mean by self-care, then I suggest going way back to episode number 9, The Fine Art of Self-Care. And we will, of course, have a link to that episode in today's show notes. For today's show notes, just go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/130. Now, how do we help low-income individuals with fibromyalgia? I'm just going to start off by saying this is a big problem. I'm not going to lie about that. This is a big problem. For me, I first became aware of this back in 2013 because I was tapped to testify at a hearing in the state of Oregon that was trying to decide whether or not to cover fibromyalgia under their state healthcare program. We spent years fighting that battle. I can't fight that battle anymore because I don't live in Oregon, but we spent years trying to fight that. And I got to be honest with y'all, Oregon is still the only state in the United States that does not cover fibromyalgia on their state healthcare program. If you are on the Oregon Health Plan, if you're on Medicaid in Oregon, you do not have coverage for fibromyalgia treatment, period. You might get treatment for seeing a sleep doctor because poor sleep is a part of fibromyalgia and poor sleep is covered. You might get a referral to a physical therapist because low back pain is covered, but fibromyalgia itself is not covered. Obviously, this is a huge problem. When we have somebody who goes on Medicaid, it's usually because they have low income, right? But if they don't have coverage for their fibromyalgia, how are they ever going to get better? They're going to stay very symptomatic. They're not going to be able to work, and they are never going to be able to come off of Medicaid. Now, of course, I'm talking about Oregon here very specifically because it's a problem I know a lot about, but there will be similar problems in all of the states. Now, like I said, it's a big problem, and it's a problem too big for one person to solve. So we're going to talk about what I do to help in this situation. We'll also give you some other resources. So, like I said, I spent a lot of my personal time and energy fighting that Medicaid battle back in 2013. And eventually they made the final decision that fibromyalgia just is not going to be covered. There was nothing more to do there. But because of that, it impacted how I do my business. Nearly everything that I do is available for free. I ran a free support group for years when I lived in Portland. Now that I, have a bigger business and moved to Washington, but that free support group, I spent my own time, energy, money running that for people. All of my books you can get for free. I give them away for free. You can go to today's show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/130, and you can download both of my books for free. These aren't shortened, edited versions. It's the whole book, the whole thing. In fact, Take Back Your Life is actually the curriculum for our Certified Fibromyalgia Advisor class, or probably about 90% of the curriculum for the advisor class. There are a few things that we teach in the class that aren't in there. And of course, working one-on-one with a class, working one-on-one with a coach, those things are not happening when you just read a book, but the information itself is all there. This podcast, it's free. Anybody can listen to it. And some of these podcast episodes that I've done are literally the same classes that I teach in my advisor program. I have literally used the outline for the class to do the podcast episode. So the information, again, that you're getting is the same thing that people pay a lot of money for free in this podcast. I do free workshops occasionally. In fact, I just did one an hour ago. I did a free workshop, no charge. And that video from that workshop is going to be also available for people at no charge. Everything that I post on social media, the videos that I post, the information that I post, again, there's no charge for that. You even have the option of having a free consultation with a student or a coach on our Find a Coach page. Of course, depending on availability, those do tend to fill up really quick. But when there's availability, you can have a consultation with one of my students or one of my coaches at no charge. You can even apply for a scholarship for 3 coaching sessions at a pay what you can rate. Actually, that scholarship is set up in honor of a client of mine who passed away while we were working together. So the Sherry Little Coaching Scholarship you can apply for and actually receive coaching at a low rate. Several of my coaches also do coaching scholarships. In fact, I teach all of my coaches to give back to the community and to think about how they can provide their services and the work that they do in ways that people can access if they have low income. Obviously, this is a business, right? My coaches are running a business. In many cases, that is their only business, and that's how they support their family. So we can't do everything for free, but we do give a portion of what we do for free for people who have low income. So that's what I do. Other resources that you can access, just thinking about, so if I provide somebody coaching for free or give my book away for free, how do you implement the things that are in there? How do you pay for the things that I suggest that you do, right? Well, one of the resources that I love sending people to is schools. So in Portland, I send a lot of people to NCNM, as it was at the time, the National College for Naturopathic or Natural Medicine, I should say. It's NUNM now, but they have a student clinic. And you can go see a student for acupuncture or massage, or even a naturopathic student at a much, much lower cost. They even have a sliding fee scale based on your income. There was also the Oriental College of Medicine. There were massage schools, chiropractic colleges, dental schools. All of these typically have a student clinic attached to it, which allows you to see a student in training at a lower cost. You can also look for group programs. Working Class Acupuncture in Portland did group acupuncture on a sliding fee scale. Definitely not the same as when I see my acupuncturist and I have a private room and can undress and, have my acupuncture. It's a much different deal, but it's still acupuncture, right? And it's still helpful. There might even be group programs through organizations like the YMCA or through your hospital or HMO. I know way back before I had my fibromyalgia diagnosis, I went through an amazing program for TMJ disorders through Kaiser Permanente, and it didn't cost me anything but my regular copay. Oh gosh, I saw a physical therapist. I saw a hypnotherapist. I went to biofeedback. I went to several classes. They were all just covered by this copay. Of course, that was a million years ago, so who knows what it would be now. But the point is, you can still look for programs like this that are specifically either through the organization, like your HMO or your insurance, or through a hospital, or designed for low-income populations. When it comes to things like medications, I would take a look at patient assistance programs. There are a lot of companies that provide patient assistance programs. And if you want to learn more about these, I would recommend checking out episode 111, which is Understanding Insurance Coverage with Dr. Chelsea Leibowitz. In there, she does talk about these patient assistant programs, how to find them, how to utilize them, how to get on them. Just to give you some examples, several of the medications that I use to manage my migraines have rebates or patient assistance options. So the Botox that I get that is several $1,000s every time I go to get it, my insurance covers a portion of it, and Botox has a savings program that I submit the receipts, I get reimbursed for all of it. It is free except for my copay to see the doctor. Emgality, same thing. My Nurtec, same thing. So if you look for these savings programs, rebate programs, patient assistance programs, there may be things that you can take advantage of that are free or lower cost. Also look for and ask for sliding fee scales. Not everybody has this option, but a lot of people do. And it's certainly not going to hurt you at all to ask. So you can ask for those. And of course, shop around for the best price. When you buy your supplements, for instance, you don't have to buy the most expensive brand. You could buy a lower cost brand. Do your research, make sure you're actually getting good quality. Sometimes the cheaper supplements aren't as bioavailable, so you want to make sure that your body can actually absorb what you're taking. So do check that. But it doesn't mean you have to buy the most expensive one. There's lots of options out there. Now, what about other organizations? What are other people doing for this problem? There are 3 organizations in particular I want to mention just because I am familiar with the work that they do, and they're doing awesome work when it comes to this particular topic. The first one I want to mention is the Support Fibromyalgia Network. We're going to have Melissa Talwar here from Support Fibro in 2 more episodes, and she's going to be talking to us about the advocacy work that they do. They actually spend a lot of time and energy coordinating visits for patients with their legislators. So I have people who are going to Washington, D.C. with Support Fibro to meet with their senators and their congressmen to explain to them why this is a problem. And as people with fibromyalgia, with chronic fatigue, when you're actually meeting with them yourself and you can talk about how the problem impacts you personally, that has a whole lot more punch. It means a whole lot more to those legislators than it would be if I were to go talk to them about you, right? I can talk to them about me. And of course, I can talk to them as the founder of the International Fibromyalgia Coaching Institute, right? But it's different when they hear your personal stories. It's also different when you're the one who votes for them, right? So me talking to a Washington senator is a lot different than me talking to a senator from Florida, right? Why should they listen to me? I can't vote for them. So Support Fibro does a great job of getting these people connected and really working on that. They're doing so many good things when it comes to advocacy, making sure that the people who are spending money understand why we need more research for fibromyalgia. Because once we have research that shows certain treatments are effective, it's more likely for insurance to cover those treatments, right? It's a process, but they are working hard on that process. The second organization I want to mention is the Fibromyalgia Care Society of America. They have a program called Fibro Cares. And their Fibro Cares program provides things like emergency financial support, fresh food, nutrition, employment assistance, and a lot of other things. In fact, you can see this program at work in the fibromyalgia documentary Invisible. If you haven't seen that yet, we've got a link to that in today's show notes as well. fibromyalgiapodcast.com/130. Of course, we'll have links to all of these organizations. But when you watch that documentary, there's a scene where Millie and Nick go visit somebody who needs help. That is basically their Fibro Cares program at work, even though it's not mentioned as such. That's what they do. So that is a great organization to check into as well. And then the third organization I want to mention is the Sherry Little Foundation. And you might recognize that name, Sherry Little. She is the client that I was working with that we lost to suicide back in 2015. And Sherry left money to provide grants to chronic pain patients for things that insurance doesn't cover. Now, she wanted these to be micro grants of $1,000 or less. And she wanted to support people who were lower income, who don't have the kind of family or friend support. So basically exactly the people that Stephanie was talking about. The Sherry Little Foundation provides grants of $1,000 or less. And they're going to be for things like maybe your insurance covers you getting a scooter, but the deductible is more than you can afford. We will help with that. Or if your insurance doesn't cover a scooter, we can do that for you too. Maybe you need to have a ramp built in your house. Maybe you need to have a carrier put on the back of your car so you can take your scooter with you. Maybe you want to try certain kinds of treatments. Maybe you want to try a TENS unit or have a nerve implant or whatever it is. That is what these grants are for. In fact, we just gave out our first grant. We'll be talking about that later, but we just gave out our first grant, and it actually was to help someone get a scooter, which was really awesome. So we'll share more about that story to come. But the Sherry Little Foundation is also a resource. We only give out a few of these grants a year, and you can still go check out the website and sign up to be notified when our application windows open. So obviously, there is a ton of work to do, and these organizations and resources and what I do myself, what my coaches do, it's not enough. We're doing all we can. Don't get me wrong. We're doing all we can, but it's still not enough. There's just still so much more work to get done. And so get involved. We need you and we need your help. Get involved with one of these organizations. You could start a support group in your area. You could advocate with your local and your national lawmakers. You could write letters. You could make phone calls. There is so much that can be done, but we need more people to help us do it. So please, please get involved. Again, go to today's show notes to get links to these organizations and to learn more. It's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/130. Now, on to the second question, the second email I received. This came in, like I said, by email, and she said, having the support of a coach sounds wonderful and just what I need right now in my life. But I don't have a fibromyalgia diagnosis. Can I work with a coach if I don't have fibromyalgia? Now, we are certified fibromyalgia coaches, so obviously fibromyalgia is the thing that we know. So this is a great question. If you don't have fibromyalgia, can a fibromyalgia coach help you? And the answer is yes, with a little asterisk that says depending. So the yes means, of course, we can help you. There are so many things that we do, things like helping you learn how to manage the energy that you have, getting better sleep, improving your brain fog. Those things, of course, help all kinds of different conditions. If you have lupus, if you have CFS, if you have who knows what, if you're just middle-aged and tired, right? We can help with all of that. Of course we can. Now, the other thing that we can help with that I think was part of this person's question is we can actually help you get that diagnosis or find out for sure that that's not your diagnosis. A lot of people don't realize that not only can we help you get better, but we can also help you get a clear diagnosis. And the way that works is like this. When you do your consultation with your coach, you can talk about the symptoms that you're having, what's worked for you, what hasn't worked, what you've tried. And because we really are experts in fibromyalgia, of course, we're not doctors. We're experts, but not doctors. So as not a doctor, I can't give you a diagnosis, right? But because I've been doing this for 15 plus years, I do know a thing or two about fibromyalgia, and I can give you a good idea of, yep, that sounds like fibromyalgia, or, that actually doesn't sound like fibromyalgia at all. And I've had that conversation with people during their consultations. Sometimes I talk to people and I'm like, I think all these fibromyalgia treatments didn't work for you because you've got something else going on that hasn't been diagnosed yet. And so sometimes I will, from a consultation, refer people back to their doctor. Sometimes I will also work with those clients to find the right doctor, to prepare for those doctor visits, to go over test results, what things they want to ask their doctor, all of this to go through that process of eventually getting a clear diagnosis. Because we are, as coaches, so familiar with fibromyalgia, we can often give you tips, questions to ask, tests maybe to ask your doctor to run that'll help differentiate between fibromyalgia and maybe some other things, right? So if you don't have a fibromyalgia diagnosis, but you think you might have fibromyalgia and you want to get a diagnosis, hiring a coach is a great option. We usually start off working with people for about 3 months, which is a great amount of time to be able to prepare for that doctor visit, find the doctor, and hopefully even have the visit. Although some specialists you have to wait even longer for in some areas, but we can at least help get you prepared. And meanwhile, help you feel a little bit better in the process. If you don't have a fibromyalgia diagnosis and you don't necessarily want one, or maybe you have a different diagnosis, maybe you're diagnosed with lupus or chronic fatigue or whatever it is, if the work that I talk about here on the podcast sounds like it would help you, then by all means, we would love to help you. And, you know, you can have whatever other thing you've got, lupus, RA, whatever, and fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is the little bit that goes on top that cranks up the volume. So, using arthritis as an example, maybe you've got joint pain, but fibromyalgia cranks that up a notch. And now, if you have both, not only do your joints hurt, but other things hurt as well. Or your joints hurt more than they would otherwise. So that fibromyalgia piece just kind of turns everything up a notch. And yes, absolutely, you can work with a coach to help manage that fibro piece, that amplification part of things, even if you're seeing another doctor or treating another condition. All right, let's go ahead and wrap that up there then with today's show notes. Again, it's fibromyalgiapodcast.com/130. Of course, we're going to have links to those other episodes that I've mentioned. I'll have links to, actually might even link to the blog post that I wrote about that Medicaid fight back in 2013. But we'll also have links to those organizations, and I will have links to where you can schedule a consultation with a coach if that's something that you are interested in. Oh, one more thing I want to mention, kind of along the lines of this question, but can you go through our training programs if you want to be a coach that works with more than just fibromyalgia? And the answer to that, of course, is also yes. And the main reason I say yes to that is you need to know how to rule out fibromyalgia. Not to mention the fact that a lot of what we teach is good for everything else, like I mentioned earlier, but it's also really good to know everything you can. Number one, if you have clients with fibromyalgia, and number two, so you can help clients know if they need to pursue a fibromyalgia diagnosis or if it's something else. All right. Our listener shout out today, of course, is to Stephanie, who gave us that awesome question at the beginning. Thank you so much for listening, Stephanie. And thank you so much for speaking up and asking that question. These are things that I don't really talk about much on the podcast because I'm so focused on how do we make things better. And of course, I'm going to tell you, this is how you make things better. But you're right. There's some other details that might be helpful for the person listening who doesn't have the same sort of privilege or resources. So thank you for your question, Stephanie. And everybody come back next time for our next episode. I am super excited. I am going to learn with you in episode 131. Rheumatologist Dr. Isabel Amig is coming back on the podcast, and she is going to talk about these new weight loss medications, the GLP-1 meds. Now, the reason I'm having her come talk about these, yes, most people with fibromyalgia, we could stand to lose a few pounds, and it's really hard for us to do. So yes, there is that piece. But recently, Dr. Amig posted on her social media an article that showed how GLP-1 meds help to reduce inflammation. And as a rheumatologist, she has used those meds to help improve her patients with autoimmune issues or other types of inflammatory conditions. It's in some ways helped her patients get over the hump that, maybe they hit a plateau, weren't as well as they wanted to be. This was a medication that helped them with that. So please come back for our next episode, 130, with Dr. Isabel Amig as we talk about GLP-1 meds. And that wraps up another episode of the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhaus. For daily doses of hope, inspiration, and practical advice, come hang out with me on Facebook. Visit facebook.com/fibrocoach to find my personal coaching page and connect with me directly. To find the show notes, additional resources, or to schedule a consultation with me or one of my coaches, visit fibromyalgiapodcast.com.